11 years after completion of the first European Space Agency ESA long-term mission to the Russian Mir space station, and after many years of training and preparation, the time had finally come. The Astrolab mission began on the 4th of July 2006, a public holiday in the United States and a special day for Thomas Reiter too, because Germany was approaching the semi-finals of the Football World Cup. Another reason to use the opportunity to wave the German flag on the way to the launch ramp. About 4 hours before launch, the crew were buckled into their seats aboard Space Shuttle Discovery. After 2 launch attempts had been abandoned in the last few days because of weather, the crew were mindful of the maximum that all good things come in threes, and very hopeful that this time the launch of mission STS-121 would go 11, ahead.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, main engine start, 2, 1, booster ignition, and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery, returning to the space station, paving the way for future missions beyond.
The launch is without any doubt an emotional highlight in any mission. The pull at liftoff is simply astonishing. In less than 9 minutes, you're in orbit, and you start to experience weightlessness. The objectives of the Astrolab mission included, on the one hand, the execution of a scientific program on board the ISS, and on the other hand, gaining experience in the operation of such a space station, in preparation for the launch of the Columbus Laboratory. All the measures that NASA had taken in recent years to improve safety of their space shuttle appeared to have been successful. The successful launch of Discovery would be greeted with relief by ESA, because now construction of the International Space Station, ISS, could go steadily ahead. It was 2 days from the launch to the rendezvous with the ISS, and the crew had their hands full. Immediately before docking, the surface of the shuttle was photographed by the ISS crew in order to detect possible damage to the heat protection tiles. A few minutes after this exercise, the shuttle docked with the ISS.
Houston and Alpha Discovery, capture confirmed.
Pavel Vinogradov, commander of the ISS, and Jeff Williams, the chief engineer, gave Thomas a warm welcome to his new home. After the short time in the narrow confines of the shuttle, the crew now had to get used to and explore the roomier environment of the ISS. It's about 60 meters from the American laboratory at the forward end to the Russian service module at the rear.
Hey, Jeff.
Along the way, you pass through Module Node 1, where the American airlock is docked. Next comes the adapter, which joins the American and Russian segments. The Russian Zarya module serves mainly as a storage facility for all the materials needed for life on board. The feeling of weightlessness is fantastic. Moving down the length of the ISS is a great way to enjoy it. Important parts of the life maintenance systems are located in the service module. The table at which meals are eaten, the bench at which the crew attend to their assigned daily tasks, and the toilet. And this is the door to Thomas's bedroom, which has an area of only 0.6 square meters. This small space where a sleeping bag is fastened to the wall can, however, be personalized a little with family pictures and other small items that remind him of home. The special thing about this room is the window, which offers a wonderful view of the Earth and the horizon before falling asleep. From a height of almost 400 kilometers, you can see the Earth like a ball in the blackness of space. It's an overwhelming sight. It takes 90 minutes to complete one orbit. In this time, the station flies over our planet in day and night. The sunrises and sunsets run like a time-lapse picture, giving an unbelievable display of color. You can look out over whole areas of continents and be inspired by the diversity of colors and shapes that the land masses, seas and clouds have to offer. On the night side of the orbit, there is the excitement of illuminated cities. In good weather, the outline of Europe is clearly recognizable. In the most northerly and southerly segments of the orbit, you sometimes see the aurora over the polar regions. The crew had brought with them in Discovery's cargo hold the Leonardo logistic module, in which about 4 tons of supplies for the ISS were stowed. After the module was docked with the ISS, and with the aid of the space station and shuttle robotic arms, the crew began to transfer the goods. Given the limited stowage room on board the ISS, this task was a real challenge. The Astrolab mission scientific program includes about 20 experiments in the fields of human medicine, biology and physics. It was also Thomas's job to carry out some NASA experiments. As well as spare parts and consumables, the shuttle also brought up the European Melfi logistic module, a deep freezer capable of cooling scientific probes to below 80 degrees Celsius, and the European Modular Cultivation System, EMCS, a facility for conducting biological experiments. The crew installed all this equipment in the American laboratory. Whilst the shuttle was docked, a combined supper was naturally included in the program. For this, there was the luxury of a table.
But what it really means for the program is, we've struggled for a long time since Columbia dealing with the tank, trying to fix problems with the tank and the foam. And granted, this is only one data point. We still have more flights to go. I hope it comes out okay, and I think it's going to. And my hats are off to all of the engineers and all of the folks in the shuttle program that have worked so hard on this for so long, trying to solve a very, very difficult problem. And to get a clean vehicle or a win, I think is really exciting, and I'm really excited for them. And my hats are off to the whole workforce who worked on this.
The departure of the shuttle crew brings mixed feelings. On the one hand, those left behind look forward to their future life on board the ISS. And on the other hand, the people with whom they've been working very intensively over the past months are now leaving. The departing crew also faces an especially critical phase of the flight, namely re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. On top of which, it wasn't clear at this point when the shuttle that would take Thomas back to Earth would be launched. Be that as it may, day-to-day life aboard the ISS now began, and Thomas reported to Earth from the station at regular intervals. For example, in answer to the question of German Chancellor Angela Merkel during a live call on the 20th of July as to whether he'd already started the scientific experiments. Thomas told the Chancellor that so far he had done 2 experiments, the first one being linked to studies of the vestibular system, for which he'd been using the so-called eye-tracking device. The experiment aims at improving our knowledge of how the human vestibular system functions, which is important as it can be affected by a multitude of malfunctions. The studies in space enable a better understanding of how the different senses in our body, like the eyes, the vestibular organs themselves, the muscle spines, sensations and so forth, how all the information from all these senses is combined and processed in our brain to provide us with an idea of where we are at any moment and of how we're moving. The second experiment Thomas described to the Chancellor also addressed research in physiology. It uses a sensor analyzing the nitrogen oxide in the air in Thomas's breath, with the objective of identifying possible irritations or sicknesses of his pulmonary system. These were the first 2 experiments Thomas performed, together with his fellow crew member, Pavel. Without a doubt, one of the high points of a space mission are the extravehicular activities or spacewalks. Preparation is very thorough and takes at least 2 weeks. Among other things, it involves the fitting and preparation of a spacesuit. As the pressure in the spacesuit during a spacewalk is only about 30% of pressure at sea level, the astronauts have to breathe pure oxygen for a few hours before going outside to prevent the occurrence of decompression illness. Before putting on the suits, the pressure in the airlock is reduced so that they can climb into the suits without oxygen masks. The spacesuits are a true masterpiece of technology. Think of them as a small spacecraft. In fact, they contain all the systems that are available, for example, in a Soyuz module, only in miniaturized form. True, the spacesuit doesn't offer exactly the same freedom of movement as leisure clothes do, but it's very ergonomically constructed and enables us to execute an enormous variety of tasks in the vacuum of space. Pavel, the station commander, gave support in all these preparations on the day of the mission. The airlock is decidedly small and only provides space for 2 EMUs, as the American spacesuits are called. In this narrow space were a variety of instruments and equipment which were to be installed on the exterior of the ISS during their excursion. The opening of the exit hatch was the first hurdle which had to be overcome. With every component that the astronauts fitted to the ISS exterior, the freedom of movement in this small space increased. Working outside means climbing around the outside of the station at a height of almost 400 kilometers at a speed of 27,000 kilometers per hour, an overpowering, almost indescribable feeling. A spacewalk like this is no walk in the park. Although the astronauts are in weightlessness, working in a spacesuit is very strenuous and has more in common with hard physical exercise. Every movement carried out with hands or arms needs strength.
This is the Missy 4 experiment that was just installed by astronaut Thomas Reiter.
So let's see how that works with this camera.
The work went very well. Thomas and Jeff were able to complete the planned tasks in somewhat less time than they'd needed in training. After finishing the additional tasks that Mission Control in Houston had also given, there was also time to take some photographs.
Okay, maybe I stop here, Jeff, and take some shots of you. Yeah, I'm getting some good ones of you. Very nice.
Astronaut Jeff Williams taking a picture of astronaut Thomas Reiter. Reiter wearing the German flag on his spacesuit as he's a European Space Agency astronaut representing Germany.
After just under 6 hours, the astronauts returned to the airlock. It would take a few days to digest the extraordinary things that they'd seen and felt.
Herr Reiter, Sie sind ja jetzt quasi dazu verurteilt, wie eine Familie miteinander zu leben. Ist das Verhältnis gut untereinander? Vertragt ihr euch gut?
Ja, Gott sei Dank. Das Verhältnis ist sehr gut. Das sind alles liebe Kerle. Und trotz der Enge, die hier oben herrscht und des doch teilweise sehr engen Dienstplans, in dem ja letztendlich jede Minute am Tag verplant ist, läuft das ganz hervorragend.
As pleasant as weightlessness may seem in daily life, the side effects of muscle and bone wastage are far from pleasant. In order to combat these effects, and in particular to become accustomed to gravity again as soon as possible after landing, the astronauts need to complete an exercise program every day. 2 exercise bikes, a running machine and a power trainer are available for this. Thomas trained on this equipment for 1 hour twice a day to keep himself fit.
Now I have planned a little experiment or a little demonstration to show you actually what zero gravity does. I have here 2 table tennis balls. Look at that. And I just want to show you, see they are floating here very nicely. And on ground, of course, this could not be done. They would be falling down. And now I take a little piece of fabric and try to charge them electrically. you can see as soon as I release them, due to this very, very small electrical forces, they start to flow apart. And that's exactly why we are using weightlessness to do this research here.
One of the scientific tasks Thomas had to carry out was the plasma crystal experiment. The applications of this new area of research are enormous and range from improvement of the understanding of fundamental physical processes in liquids, solids and gases to the exploration of mechanisms in fusion reactors of the future. An experiment in the field of biology looked at the mechanisms that play a role in the activation of our immune systems. To investigate this, cell cultures were exposed to weightlessness and different speeds in a centrifuge, after which they were preserved for further experiments on Earth. To avoid contamination by the substances used in this experiment, the work is carried out in a so-called glove box. About 2 months after the start of Thomas's mission, on the 9th of September 2006, Space Shuttle Atlantis was launched. It was carrying a new component to the ISS and docked 2 days later.
Station capture confirmed.
After a number of years, further expansion of the space station had once again begun with the STS-115 mission. The installation and commissioning of what is known as the P3-P4 segment, which doubles the ISS electricity production capacity, was one of the prerequisites for being able to supply the European Columbus module with sufficient electrical energy in the near future. 3 spacewalks and further use of the robotic arm were required to secure this component to the left side of the station, to make the first electrical connections, and finally, to bring the solar-operated batteries up to speed. The final connection of this new energy source to the power supply system of the American segment and its taking into service were, however, planned for the next shuttle mission, STS-116. With its new solar array, the station is even easier to spot from Earth in the evening sky. After 6 days on board the ISS, it was time to say goodbye before the shuttle undocked from the station.
This is how it looks before. And Jeff is brave enough to try it.
You're the brave one. I have little to risk. Except your friendship, maybe.
No. I'm absolutely fine with everything that comes out. We are still here long enough, you know.
On the 20th of September, the next long-term crew arrived at the ISS on board a Russian Soyuz module. For Pavel and Jeff, their 6-month stay on board was drawing to a close.